Alright, hello Star Wars players. Welcome to episode 3 of my Jedi Training Academy, in which I want to share some of my wisdom with any new and returning players that want it. Today we're gonna look at deck building. The first two episodes were about gameplay. Today we're gonna build a deck. I'm going to build a profit deck, and we're also going to talk about some basic principles about deck building. So I figured it would be best to go through with one deck, but we're going to talk about some theory and some stuff that applies to all decks first, and then go along with a single deck. We were talking about game plan in the episodes before, and of course you lay the basis for your game plan when building a deck. And I'd say let's get right into it. I prepared something for you. We're gonna build a profit deck, and what I did first is the first thing you should maybe do is load up all the shields and the starting effect, because you want this every time. So if you're using GAMP, might be a good idea. I don't actually do it, but it might be a good idea to save something like the starting effect and a set of all the shields. And then when you build a new deck, you just load it up so that you don't forget it. We're going to start a profit deck. So what I did was I pulled up all the cards that my objective tells me to pull, and then all the follow-up cards that this is looking for. So basically, when you build a new deck, you take an objective, you take a cool card that you want to use as a basis. Probably the easiest thing is to use an objective as a basis, and then go from there. I chose Profit today because it's a deck that's not at the top of the meta, so that not everybody knows all the builds. Interestingly, there were 9 Profit decks in the MPC, so rather a lot. Even 2 top players, Joe Olsen and Reed Smith, played it, though, and they played different versions, but they didn't do that well. And we're gonna go into why I chose Profit later. So we're starting with Profit, and what this one tells us: deploy Jabba's Palace and Audience Chamber with Frozen Han here. So I pull up the Jabba's Palace and the Audience Chamber. I pull up 3 different Hans, because this is a Han that has a special text, a virtual card for the objective. This one is the best Han in general. And then the objective tells us on the flip side that you can retrieve more force if you have a Han with power smaller than 4, so I put one of these Hans in here too. And then this location tells us may deploy bow shooter, so I pulled up bow shooter here. Basically on the forum somebody said, please tell me how to build a 60 card deck. What I'm always doing is I'm pulling up 80 cards and then I can't decide what to cut. That's actually how I work too. Like, I rather have all the cards up first and then cut than just go to 60 cards from the beginning. So then the objective also tells us that you get Luke, R2, and C3PO for free, or for minus deploy. Master Luke deploys for free, so I got the best R2, the best 3PO. I got the Master Luke because he's special to this objective. And then on the flip side, you get bonuses for Han, Luke, Leia, Chewie, Lando. I didn't pull up all these because these mains, there's multiple personas, so it would clutter the deck box at the moment when pulling up all these cards at start. So, and then we're going for a starting interrupt. Like, the default starting interrupt is heading for the medical frigate, but there's a special interrupt which works with this objective, because if you have deployed Jabba's Palace site, what we do, deploy Seeking an Audience and up to 2 effects. So I pulled up Seeking an Audience, and there's 2 different one of these, a virtual and a non-virtual, so I pulled up both. And they allow us to deploy stuff from the deck. Again, it's mains, so because it's mains like Chewy Landolay, I didn't pull these up. But that's like the basis where we start. And then before we're gonna build the deck, I want to take a look at like the opposition. So you're not building a deck in a vacuum. You always have to think about what's out there. So I want to use this opportunity to look at the defensive shields first, because you're always up against these cards, and then some common dark side cards now, since we're building a light side deck, that that you should be well aware of when building a deck. So let's start with the defensive shields, and let's start with the most important one in my eyes, which is battle order. So I actually went the extra mile and prepared a graphic for this. Yuhei. Um, in which I put the decks into about 7 different groups regarding to how good they are with coping with battle order. So you see here on the left, I hope you can read that one. It's pure ground on the left, which means that your ability to fulfill battle order is practically zero, or it is zero. And then on the very right, you got pure space, which is the opposite of this, so also not fulfilling battle order. And in the very middle, you got the balanced version, where you like the best, you got the best capability to fulfill this shield. And then there's like, I put 2 more groups in between, which is token ground and token space, and then mostly ground. And then on the other side, we got mostly space and then token ground. And I use this, I think this is very useful to seeing where you are when you're fulfilling battle order or battle plan. And I'm not saying you should always only build balanced decks. You can build ground-based decks or space decks. Probably pure space is pretty impossible at the moment, or not really, because you would have no characters, only ships. But everything else is possible. You just have to be aware what that means and how that affects your game plan. So for example, Prophet is not really known for being a balanced deck or a space deck. You're mostly ground, and that's probably how we're going to end up there. But we need to be aware of that, what that means. Which means with the Prophet deck, we're probably going to be pure ground or token space. And we need to be aware that battle order will most probably be played by our opponent and will affect us. What that means is that we can't rely on lots of small drains on the ground, because that would cost way too much force. And also it means that our activation, we need to look at our activation, because it's always good to have a better activation so that we got enough force to pay for the occasional drain. Now, Prophet, the objective says that you can do extra damage without draining, which is always useful because that one gets around battle order. And therefore, it is more acceptable to not be a balanced deck and be on the ground only. But if you got a deck that's that doesn't have these abilities and there's no cards that you could put in there to have good drains, have bigger drains that only have the small drains, then you're probably looking, at a bad deck in the making if you can't go to space 2. So what I mean with these with this description, I think pure ground is pretty obvious. So don't play any ship at all, and you can't go to space. Token space means to me that you have a ship in there or maybe 2, and you can go to space to like keep your opponent honest, or if he's spreading too thin, maybe attack him there. But you're not playing a system yourself, and you're relying on your opponent to play a system, and then maybe, at least for some turns, be able to go there to be able to drain for free against battle order. When you're mostly ground, your chances to fulfill battle orders are way better, because you're probably playing a system. You're playing a system yourself. You're playing multiple ships, and your focus is still on the ground, but you're up in space to compete there, and you can play your system yourself and be able to go and do both theaters and then drain there. And then if you're balanced, that means that you're probably playing multiple sites and multiple systems, and you got enough ships so that you can cover these grounds. And then the other way around. So, for example, a very balanced deck at the moment is Diplomatic Mission to Alderaan, where you're generally playing the Tatooine system, the Chandrila system. You're playing multiple Tatooine sites, and you can fulfill all these sites, fulfill battle order pretty easily, and profit from being in both theaters. A deck that is mostly ground to maybe even balanced is probably Court of the Wild Gangster, because you got quite a few ships and you can pull them from your deck. You got a couple utility characters that are really good in space. But you can, on this chart, they're probably pretty close to each other. But their capability of punishing you for not being in space are way different. So if you're playing Court, you're only doing a drain of 1 in space. I mean, you're getting this for free, and you're probably getting any drains you're getting on the ground are for free. But in space, you're only draining for 1, while a Diplo deck, for example, can, if you have the Tentive with Bail Organa on it, and then maybe there's a few other Eldrainians, you can drain for 4 in space and really punish the opponent for not being in space. So this chart is useful to see where do I want to go, and it's also, you can use this chart to like explain certain things, like, for example, we're talking about Court. Court is pretty weak against any mains that are pure ground or token space, because obviously if you're pure ground, you got more resources to be on the ground than when you're mostly ground. Obviously, because in mostly ground, you're having the space stuff. So Court is a bit weaker on the ground to all these mains, but it wants to hold a certain side, which is always a problem if you're weaker. You need to be flexible on the ground when you're the weaker side, but Court can't do this. It needs to be in the audience chamber. And then you can't really punish the main stack in space because you're only draining for 1 there. So that's also an explanation why, for example, Court would be not so good against mains and has the problems. So in my opinion, this shield is the most important shield you need to look out for, and you need to know what's my plan against this and how do I handle it. Do I want to play it myself? Yeah, in most matches it will get played because maybe one of the decks is fulfilling space and the other is not. Sometimes when you're both able to fulfill it, still the one if you're at the start, you're only in one theater. The other person might pull it on you just so that to stifle you in the beginning, and then it won't have a large role in the long run. But in some matchups, it will have a pretty long run effect if you're pure ground or only token space, and there's maybe no system. Like if both decks are token space, and maybe you both have a few chips, but there's no system, so it doesn't really matter. So what does that mean for our profit deck? As I said, we need to be prepared to drain, to pay if we want to drain. We got alternative damage with our objective once we're flipped. And we need to look out for the activation because we're going to need some force to drain here. Or we need to include some ships. Probably, from my experience, we won't be able to go like mostly ground and then play a system and multiple ships, just because the deck forces, or the objective forces us a bit to go to the ground. We're going to talk about that later when we go into the details of the profit deck. All right, so that was battle order and battle plan. So then the next important thing we got to talk about is this one, and also maybe these two. So Come Here, Big Coward and Resistance. They're both talking about battlegrounds. I mean, Battle Order was also about battlegrounds. Um, Here it is important to know, like, how many battlegrounds do I want to play, and how much do I want to drain. So we were talking about, all right, I don't want to drain, don't want to be drain for one, drain for one, drain for one if I can't go to space. So maybe I can play some lightsabers and drain for 3 or for 4 at one location. That would be great. The thing is, there's the resistance shield, which limits to your force drains to a total of 2. Um, if your opponent is able to occupy 3 battlegrounds. So if there's too many battlegrounds on the table, so to say, then draining for more than 2 at one location is not a good plan, or it will get foiled. And on the other hand, Come Here, Big Coward limits opponents' drains at non-battlegrounds. So opponents' force drain at non-battlegrounds locations are canceled. That one can actually work to your advantage. I mean, there's a light side shield that you can use. So these are like, how many battlegrounds do I want to play, and how do I want to use these? Because if you're playing multiple battlegrounds yourself, you can't be everywhere. You're opening up yourself to resistance because the opponent can occupy these battlegrounds on your sides too. And if you're playing a lot of battlegrounds and you're playing some non battlegrounds, your opponent can then get around your Come Here Big Coward or your light side equivalent and maybe drain you at your non-battleground locations if he can get there. Like a very popular deck at the moment is No Idea, which has a lot of spies, obviously. It's also pretty well balanced. So what you can do there is that if you, as the dark side player, are playing non-battleground locations so that you don't give too much force to your opponent, once your opponent can safely occupy at least 2 battlegrounds, they can go to your locations, to your non-battlegrounds, and drain you there. And so non-battlegrounds have the benefit of not giving any force to your opponent, but the disadvantage that once your opponent gets around Come Here Big Coward, then you might have a problem because you're getting drained there normally for 2 or 3, and if you go there to fight them, you're fighting for a location where you yourself can't do anything at all because your opponent has no icons and you can't drain them there. So we're going to talk about locations and activation a bit later, but these two are also important shields for this, for how to plan your locations. Then one shield that you're always gonna see played pretty early is this one, which lets you grab an interrupt. It's normally custom to play this as your first or second action in the game, so that you're ready to grab an important interrupt your opponent may be playing. So if you're counting on using a certain interrupt lots of time, probably used interrupt, and you're having 5 copies or more, that's not a good strategy. Shields in general are there to rein in any broken strategies, and because of this shield, playing like 5, 6, 7 copies of interrupt and relying on it does not work because your opponent is probably gonna grab that one. Somebody on the forums also asked about when to play these shields. As I said, the grabbers, people play them pretty early. In my experience, new players are very, they grab too early. I mean, that's a thing of experience, like knowing what can be in your opponent's deck and then waiting for the right card to grab. In my experience, people grab too early and therefore grab the wrong interrupt. So if you're having something like Rebel Leadership, Imperial Command, these are nice things to grab or trample in a dark side deck can really wreak havoc on you. And then if your opponent might be playing 3 or 4 Visas to get their locations, but they don't really need it afterwards. And if you grab one of these, then you're not really using this shield to the full effect. Alright, so that was that one. Then for light side, this is a dark side specific card. Do they have a code clearance? That lets your opponent stack an interrupt or Utini effect on here with which you retrieve force, and then afterwards all your retrieval is reduced by X with the number of cards. So because of this, playing interrupts or Utini effects to retrieve force, not the best way to do this. You're better doing it via an objective, a character, or whatever. And if you're having something like Rose and you rely on retrieving one every turn, if you play an interrupt, your opponent has these shields, then your Rose retrieval is cancelled for the rest of the game, so you don't want to do this. This might also be a good opportunity to talk about this shield and some of the shields that mention cards specifically. For example, let's look at this one, Fanfare. Play on table cancels Ice Storm, Lost in the Wilderness, or Disengage, Sandwall Scramble, a bunch of broken cards. So, and there's a few more shields that mention some cards by name specifically. So, in general, I would tell you to not play these cards. You gotta think about some of these cards are having an effect at the moment you play them, and some are having an effect a little bit later. So if you're looking at a card like Lost in the Wilderness, if your opponent does not have the shield and you get a chance to play it, then you can play it, and it has its effect. And your opponent can then play the shield if he wants to, but it's like too late. But if you're looking at Order to Engage, you got to play Order to Engage first. Then you got to be come into a situation where you can profit from it. So your opponent can play the shield after you play the card, still cancel it before it has its effect. So all of these cards that have an effect later and leave your opponent the ability to play a shield between playing it and getting the effect, I would not play any of these cards. Something like Lost in the Wilderness can be fine as a one-off if you think that's a good idea, but in general, yeah, you probably shouldn't. There's also a strategy of shield busting where you're trying to play so many cards that are shielded that your opponent doesn't have enough shields to get them all. But that's also pretty hard because your opponent does have 4 shields. Yeah, there's multiple interrupts that let them play more shields. And also, once somebody knows your tricks, he knows, yeah, I could use 7 shields, but these are the 4 important ones. And then you got some dead cards in your deck that you can shield against. So that's also what I wouldn't do in general. Don't try this until you're in it for the fun. Okay, so the Fanfare Shield is also an interesting shield, and the light side equivalent too, because it's one of these cards that you can use to your own benefit, not only to shield against what the opponent is doing. So let's talk about this one here for a moment. This one allows you to, once per game, upload an immediate effect. So this is a card that you cannot just play against your opponent, but also you can use it actively to help you. And at the moment, for example, an immediate effect that dark side some decks want to pull is Zizer's Bounty. So because of this, at the moment, I would not play a card like Lost in the Wilderness because there's a chance, like even if they don't suspect you're playing Lost in the Wilderness, they might still play this shield because they want to use it for themselves. So that's what you have to look out here too. One other shield, important shield, the Firepower Shield. This one has two effects, and also this is one of the few shields that are different on both sides of the Force. So the Dark Side Shield punishes you for moving from a location. If opponent moves from a location you occupy during your turn. So basically, if you as a light side player move from a location where your opponent is during their turn, then you lose 2 force. So if you're using a card like I want to react away from the battle with dodge, or I want to get away with narrow escape, cards like this not good because your opponent can play this shield and make you lose force for it. So we shouldn't rely on anything like this. And the light side shield is a little bit different. The light side shield punished the dark side for using things like Visor's Bounty or Imperial Barrier to prevent people from being in a battle. All right, what else do we have? Then, of course, we have secret plans. When we're talking about come here, big out, we're not talking about the retrieval yet. This also stops your retrieval unless you're at 2 battlegrounds. And secret plans lets you retrieve force, but you need to pay force for it. So with profit, when we flip the profit, we are allowed to retrieve multiple cards. We definitely need to be aware of this one. This is also a card. There is a light side equivalent, but since retrieving happens more on the light side, secret plans is certainly the shield you need to have to worry about more. There's not that much retrieval you can get going on the dark side, but secret plans is also a reason, maybe together with come here you back coward, depending on the battleground situation, why you should not rely on retrieving too much. Like if you want to say, you can drain me for 4, I drain you for 2, but retrieve 4 every turn. Yeah, you will probably doesn't need to pay for the 4 force, but you will always have to pay for your retrieval. All right. By the way, this is a good example for a defensive shield that shields against a certain card, but you can still maybe play this card. Weapon of Assist protects you from getting your weapon stolen. So the way you can steal a weapon from the dark side is weapon levitation. The Lost Interrupt side of this one lets you steal, for example, Vader's lightsaber when a battle starts. This is one of these cards that you can't, between playing and getting the effect, your opponent cannot play the shield. So if you can surprise him with this card, it can have a pretty devastating effect. So of course, it could be your opponent plays a shield before an important battle, and then if you have it, then it's a lost card. But this is an example, weapon levitation of a card that is shielded basically, but that can still be pretty effective, even if your opponent does not play the shield. All right, so we're not getting into too many of these others. There's cards like against pot racing or against specific cards. One more shield I want to talk about is this one for the light side to worry about specifically. The virtual version of a useless gesture. It's basically against the flip side of watch your step, but it's also could be used against solo. So this is one thing you need to look out for. This is not a shield you have to look out for long term. And normally it's not really effective if you're not playing Watch Your Step for your opponent to play this shield, because all it does, like you use solo once, and what this shield does is you need to pay 1 force for that one. So playing a shield so that your opponent has to pay 1 force during the whole game, that's not really effective use of shields. But you need to be aware that the shield is out there. So if you're having solo on the table, at one location and a weak location otherwise, and you're relying on playing the 2 jigs you have in your lost pile with solo when you get beaten down on that other location, you should be definitely aware of this card and save at least 1 force. Because if you don't have force saved and your opponent during the battle puts this shield on you, you can't play the Hujix from Lost, and that would be pretty devastating. Alright, so that's, I think, all the shields I wanted to talk about. Yeah, and then there's some other cards you need to be aware of that are in the current meta, or that are played pretty often. And for example, one of these is Imperial Decree Virtual, which reduces the damage that comes from one source by the number of battlegrounds your opponent occupies to a minimum of one. That's it's not a shield, so not everybody is playing it or is able to play it all the time, but it's definitely a card we need to be aware of with Prophet. And because of other decks in the meta, like No Idea, it's pretty widely used. It also has a nice secondary effect, so we should definitely not rely on pinging our opponent by 3 or 4 forts from our objective, because we need to be aware that he could be playing Imperial Decree. And another card would be Imperial Justice, which limits both players to having a single battle destiny. Also a card that is widely used at the moment, and therefore you should not rely on winning that one game-winning battle by drawing 5 battle destinies. Also Imperial Command, also an interrupt that your opponent can play to limit your destinies in space if he has an admiral, on the ground if he has a general. Yeah, these are cards you need to be aware of when building the deck. Okay. So let's get back into our deck. So one thing, why use Prophet as a basis for this deck we're gonna build? Excuse me. Is that as with many objectives, you have a clear-cut thing you're supposed to do. In this case, freeing Han so that you can retrieve and do damage. And then, but there's multiple ways to what to do with this. Also, this deck is pretty harsh in what it does if you're not going for the flip, because as long as you're not flipped, you cannot drain on Tatooine sites. So you can't just go, all right, I use this objective to set up some cards, and then if I don't want to, I don't do what I need to do to flip. Or like Court of the Valganser that actively does not want to flip. Prophet is not one of these decks. You definitely need to be doing this, so it has a pretty heavy focus. It guides you to what you need to do, but there's still multiple ways how to do this. So what the objective definitely wants us to do is to flip, which normally means that you want to clear the audience chamber and free Han by controlling the audience chamber. So you should usually be able to battle pretty well in this deck, and we have a clear focus what we want to do. And then obviously, if we have a deck that is very capable of battling, we can also battle anywhere else and try this as our additional route to victory. But the deck also contains a card that acts as the shortcut to flipping, which is Someone Who Loves You, which says that if Leia is present at a site where Han is a captive, release Han. I was actually going to talk about how do you find some cards that you might include for this card. Yeah, you're not gonna. I mean, if you're looking for cards with Han in game text, that will probably be too many. in this case, you just have to know that this card exists. So we have a shortcut, and we can lay different focus on battling or maybe using the shortcut. So let's first take a look at locations that we wanna use. So we're already having 2 battleground locations on the board, and if we're playing this starting interrupt, we can even get another one. So 3 battlegrounds is definitely a lot of locations where we can do damage to the opponent afterwards. So if we can, we're not looking to add more battlegrounds, but instead add force locations. So there's like 2 different routes we can go here. Let's maybe go the conventional route first, which would be looking for some activation cards that that are non-battlegrounds. And the best ones, I mean, we can go through all the locations here, but basically there's like this standard package, which would be the Jedi Council Chamber. And actually, Jedi Council nets us also the interrupt that we can use to pull this, speak with the Jedi Council. And then there's the Boss Nos Chamber and the interrupt, the Visa, with which we can pull this. So if you saw some deck lists, this one will look pretty familiar to you. These are just the 2 best non-battleground sites, activation sites that have. Why is this? Why are these the best? Because they have these pullers. So basically, what you can do, you can play like 3 or 4 non-battleground locations that give you a lot of force, and then you can activate a lot of force to if you have them all on the table. But so for example, let's put this up here. You can say, all right, why not play Yoda's hut too? Or maybe, I don't know, Obi-Wan's hut. We can, or Chief Chirper's hut and Obi-Wan's hut, yeah. Why do I not just play 5 of these locations? Then when I have them all on the table, I got tons of force. And when I draw 4 cards and I find any of these, I just play them and have a lot of force. Now the problem is, of course, the destiny, because if you have these in your deck, they're destiny 0, and the reason that you're using these pullers instead is that you got the same chance. Like you can play 6 cards between the 2 sides and the pullers, or you can play 6 different sides. So you still have 6 cards for activation, but you have way better destiny. The thing, though, you're sacrificing by doing this is you're sacrificing like your maximum output. Like having 6 locations, you definitely have a higher maximum output of force you can activate. But at the downside of having pretty bad destinies in your deck, and yeah, also for example at the downside of not getting the best location like the Jedi Council Chamber. If you're playing the interrupt package, you got a better chance to find the 3 icon location. You got better destinies in your deck, but at the downside of having a maximum output here of 5 activation. So this is a very basic principle you have to look out for in deck building. We encounter it here for the first time. That is, do you want to go for the higher maximum output, the higher variety, or do you want to go for better the better result at a higher percentage of getting it, and also maybe better destinies? So to say, the conventional wisdom, which I definitely agree in this case here, is to play only these 2 sides and then play pullers. And the question is how many pullers you want to play. Depends on how on how easy on how fast you want to get these sites. You also have, apart from maximum output that is limit, you also have diminishing value. Like as soon as you got the Jedi Council chamber, any other speak with the Jedi Council you draw doesn't do anything for you. I mean, the Visa at least has a secondary effect. It can subtract one from any just drawn weapon destiny, but speak pretty much doesn't. So again, you're looking at maximum output and reliability um, as opposed to what is my you're using. I want to have a high reliability to getting it by reducing the number of other cards you can have in your deck, and therefore the maximum output of different stuff you can use. So we go with the conventional stuff here. We can still go down from there. But basically, if you want to be pretty sure that you're getting these early, you need to play multiple pullers to multiple copies of this one to get it. So this is the one way of building the deck, by saying, all right, I'm going to get some kind of Tatooine battleground. I'm going to get these sites, and then I can get my activation going while also having some battlegrounds. And yeah, doing like this. We're most probably not adding any space location, but maybe if we do find the place later, we might. But at the moment, I would think that Prophet will end up with very little or no space. All right. So we don't know yet which location. We're going to look at that afterwards, but we already have 2 battlegrounds on the table. We could get a third if we do this. So, and these are the 2 sites we can pull well. There's not really a good other non-battleground site with 2 or more 2 icons that we can pull. Throne Room mains likes, for example, to play Insurrection and deploy single docking base, but Throne Room only starts with 1 icon. We're starting with 4 icons for us, and so I don't think we need this. Okay, so next thing you should look out for is starting effects, and that not starting effect, but effects you want to start at the start of the game. So let's go for effect and use game text immune to alter, which is what your starting interrupt asks you to play. And basically what I would like to do is good old-fashioned go through all the effects and see what might be good for this deck. So we were talking about, so the first thing we come up here is blasters. Could be an alternative, maybe is a card that can be played, but we're looking at, we don't want to drain for 1 and then do this, maybe. We're looking for lightsabers. Are we looking for blasters? I mean, we can just edit here and say this is a potential thing. Like there is a Hans blaster, a virtual one, and this could be an additional source of damage. So we can maybe put it here. We were talking about Imperial Decree limiting 1 source of damage to 1, but if you're having multiple sources of damage, like I ping you with Prophet, I ping you with this, I ping you with something else, then Decree does not reduce this one. Alright, so let's go for some more. This is not startable. Yeah, something like Disarm, for example, could be a card to put in the deck, but it's not a card that starts on table. So it will show up here when just looking for effects with immune to alter, but it's actually not anything we can start here. All right, then this one comes up here. This is interesting for us. I must be allowed to speak, because if you deploy mains on Tatooine, you get to do something. So this looks very promising to us, because that's what we're going to do anyway, deploy mains on Tatooine. And it also lets us deploy a farm. So yeah, we're going to do that afterwards. We're searching on here. Nope, not looking for the docking bay deployment. Nope, 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 nope. This one could be interesting. We got past Like My Father Before Me, which is not usable anymore since the latest avatar for this deck, because we're not on Endor. And Saitor is a good alternative to get some lightsabers, matching weapons. We're gonna play mains anyway. Nope, 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 nope. Yeah, we will have to talk about this one now. I was saying before, if anything that my locations can, or that my starting setup can pull, I want to see it. And one of the cards we have here is Shooter. Deploy an audience chamber. If you have an alien here, no battles on force drain may take place. Effect cancels if opponent occupies without an alien. So the card says the audience chamber is not a battleground anymore. You can't battle there. So you can't battle to free Han, which is a bit weird. Like if we're going for a battle version of the deck, and the regular way to free Han, this is not really something we want to do. We come here with UO, which says Boshuda may not be cancelled, which if we played Boshuda would be an interesting thing to do. But if we're looking with the conventional method first and go for some battling deck, this will not be something we want to do. So that's why we probably do not need UO. Actually, Joe Olson at the NPC played a deck because it says while no rebels at any Java's palace site, Imperials are deployed +2. So you could use these to you don't have to play with shooter just to make your Imperials opponent's Imperials deploy +2. But so you're looking at decks that are mainly or only Imperials, which is something like Imperial Entanglement or ISB. But a card like this could be very good against a certain kind of deck, and could be totally worthless against another thing. So we're not gonna think about that at the moment. And so we're probably also not thinking about this one. Yeah, we're gonna cards that are only for specific matchups. We're gonna talk about that one later. And then we have Walkling here, which is something you can always use because it gives you generation +1 from the start. This one is not immune to alter unconditionally, so we don't need it. So basically, we came up with 4 effects here that are interesting to start, plus maybe seeking an audience. Actually, if we're playing this location package and we want to play a Must Be Allowed to Speak, which allows us to deploy a farm, that allows us farm to deploy the Lost Moisture farm. So then we're already having 3 battlegrounds on the board. Do we need a 4th one? 3 battlegrounds is plenty. If you wanna interact with your opponent, you probably cannot spread too thin. So you probably don't want more. And then the activation thing, if you have these locations all on the table, you're activating 8, you're getting 11 icons, plus 1 for yourself, 12. If we're starting walking, 13. So you're getting 13 icons before whatever your opponent gives you, which is a very good number. So you don't want to activate too much, like Diplo activates so much force that if your opponent gives you a couple force, you're often activating something like 20 on your third turn, and you're getting into a situation where you could activate more than how many cards you have in a reserve deck pretty early. So there is something like too much activation, as in you don't need it. And if you're activating upwards of 12 force from yourself, when you got your stuff on the table and we're playing multiple things to pull these, then I think you're looking good, and we don't need this. So I think we can get rid of this interrupt, which also means that we get rid of the non-unique, the non-immune to alter seeking. Um, but let's pull this down there. But we still have this seeking as a good alternative to play, because it lets me retrieve an alien once per game, which could be Han when I lose him, and also it can download stuff while while Han is still frozen. So we're looking at 5 effects here that are immune to alter that we could start, and yeah, basically all of these are still good in the deck. But probably we're looking at starting Walkling, this one and this one. And these are in effect that we're not gonna start. Yeah, basically Walkling is a card, lets you activate a force. That's a pretty subtle effect. Like you can totally um, get by with not getting it, but yeah, one force from the start is pretty strong. So that's nice, but probably you want all the other 3 effects, like Seeking, I must be allowed in Sitor from the start. So maybe in this case we don't play Walkling. Floating it in the deck, so not starting it, since it is only Destiny 2, and its main effect is at the start. Probably if we're not starting it, we're going to take it out, because we need all these 3 other effects more. And this one we could totally float in the deck and play at a later time. We're not starting with any blasters on the table anyway. We can also still just delete it from the deck. We're gonna leave it here for a moment, but probably we're looking at these 3 effects, and then we're just using the regular heading. Um, actually, wait. Actually, we're probably still gonna use Rendezvous Point on Tatooine because there's no downside. We can still play the same 3 effects. Just the interrupt will not be in lost pile, but will be in our hand. And even if we don't use it to download a battleground, we're still saving a force. So this is probably what we're starting with. So as I said, pretty clear focus on freeing Han, battling in the audience chamber, and being on mains. So we want to have Luke, we want to have Lando, Leia, Chewie. This one also tells us to have Chewie, Lando, Leia, Luke, and yeah. So this one allows us to download Chewie, Lando, Leia. So pretty good synergies here, and this is also something you should always look out for, synergies in your deck, so that that cards support each other in the deck. And so with Prophet, it's pretty self-explanatory with these cards why you should now play lots of mains. So let's look at some mains here. Let's start, for example, with Lando. Now, Lando, we have the problem, so to say, with Seek an Audience. We are not allowed to download maintenance Lando. So this Lando, if we play him in the deck, we cannot pull them with Seeking an Audience. He still has a lot of the upside. I mean, he's Destiny 5, so even you cannot pull him. He's a really good character. But we should play at least one Lando that's not this one. And here's another one, the Tatooine one. So we're probably going to play at least one copy of this one. We can play a second copy of this. We're getting into multiple copies in a moment. When, for example, we're looking at Leia. So for Leia, also an important character we want to have. Multiple interesting options here. We got this one. We got this one, who she's good against leaders, which are also prevalent at the moment in decks like ISB or Imperial Entanglement, but also in Court, something like Java or something are all leaders. So she's interesting. She's not that interesting in this deck. She's theoretically interesting, but also a maintenance card, or not a maintenance card, but a reflection card. So we can't pull her, but still an alternative to maybe play. And also here, Leia is a pretty important character for us because of this one, because of our alternative plan. So if we cannot free Han by battling, we definitely need a Leia here to use this interrupt to free him anyway. And therefore, we definitely want to play multiple copies of Leia. And for this, it can also be a good idea to play General Leia, because that, just like the sides, gives you an interrupt which you can use to pull her or use with her, which is a rebel leadership. So I'm generally a fan of rather using something like general and 2 leaderships than just playing 3 different layers. Because I mean, you can play 3 different layers or you can play 3 the same layers. It's similar to the situation with the sides. If you're just playing 3 general layers, you got Destiny 1. You got the situation. The upside is if you lose one, you still got a second one. And if you're playing the interrupts, if you lose the first general layer, the leaderships do not really do that much for you without the layer. So there is an upside to playing something like maybe 2 layers and 1 or 2 leaderships, or just playing one. That's really a philosophy thing of how you want to be on the scale between I want to have all the options, or I want to be very good with the results I'm going to get. I want to be reliable with the results I'm going to get. Personally, I'm more of a player that's looking for flexibility, and therefore I personally would definitely play a maximum of 2 layers here and rather have the leaderships here, so that if you have layer on the table, you can still use the leadership in effect with her to get better results than if you're just having multiple layers in the deck. But of course, if you lose the first layer, it's gonna be hard to to get it back. And also, yeah, basically, if you have to lose a force early, for example, you're playing against Watto and your opponent forces you to lose 2 force immediately before you take your first turn, you always have the risk, like if you're losing from the top of your deck by losing that one layer, and then your leaderships are not able to get you that layer. So what you can do here is you can certainly play something like a second general layer. Um, we can put her in for now. So then synergy. Leia's important character. If we're deciding to play Rebel Leadership to get her, this one gets us any admiral or general, so we should definitely play another general at least, so that once we have her and we got a leadership and we can't really use it in battle, we have a secondary target to get him. And you have something here like General Kraken. He's a nice character. All your abilities provided by scouts and or spies, we would have to look, but probably don't have too many of these. So in this deck, he's not really doing that much. But maybe something like General Jar Jar, because he's really good if you can track a destiny, or if you know you got a good destiny, he can really get rid of opponent's droids. So if, for example, if you're fighting against Court of the Vile Gangster over the audience chamber, this could be pretty useful because they're playing quite a few nice droids. So we're gonna put one in here. There's also Obi-Wan or General Kenobi, but there's definitely other variants of Obi that we could play, so I'm not gonna pull them up here at the moment. So other characters we're looking at the Luke. We have the special Luke, the Master Luke, that is deploy 0 when you're not flipped there. So here we got the thing, we can get him for free, but get the maybe not so good version. I mean, he's immune to attrition smaller 4. He has a nice, interesting ability against aliens, but he's not Luke Skywalker Rebel Scout, who's immune smaller 6, who has ability 6. He can get additional power. His weapon destiny draws are +1, etc. So this is like, and you can go both ways maybe, and play 1 or 2 of each. I think Luke is a very important character. So let's go for 2 of these at the start. And yeah. Also, we want to be battling. We're having 3 battlegrounds here that are all on the same planet next to each other. So if we make Luke our central character, playing a card like Run Rook Rung, absolute very valuable card, and a Destiny 6 to boot. So while we're here, we should definitely add one of these to use Luke to full effect. And then who else do we need? Chewie. We need Chewbacca. Also multiple good options, but most probably, whoop, this one is just the best. And then we were talking about Obi-Wan before. We have a special Obi-Wan that is good on Tatooine, which could be an option here to play, or we can use one of the virtual ones. This one is probably good best because we need a very key card. Han, if we ever lose him, we need to get him back, and having multiple ways to do this is probably a good idea. So we're gonna use this one. And since Obi-Wan is not having any synergy with Objective or with the Seeking or this one, we're probably good playing only one of them. I mean, I also pulled up only one of Chewie, mainly because, yeah, he's very fine, but with ability 2, he's pretty vulnerable. He's also Destiny 1 only. There's no polar card or something, so I think we only need one of him. And then because of Saitor, we're gonna use some weapons here. So for Leia, we got the blaster rifle, and for the others, we need some lightsabers. Sorry. So we definitely want to play some lightsabers because we want to not only drain for one. If we want to drain, we want to drain for multiple, and therefore we definitely want to use Luke's lightsaber, um, Anakin's lightsaber. Yep, we're probably gonna use an Anakin too, and maybe Obi-Wan's lightsaber. But since we're playing only a single Obi-Wan, maybe not. What we can play? We can play Qui-Gon's lightsaber. We can play Jedi lightsaber. Where's Mace Windu's lightsaber? That could also be an option. So we did the synergy part from our objective. Now we're looking at other battle-worthy characters, and at this point we're looking for the main characters, these that can bring the big beats and that are the most powerful. So let's go for maybe Maze lightsaber too, which means that we need to go for Maze, because Virtual Maze has some nice text, can use that lightsaber twice, and Fat may not add battle destinies here. So that's an option. And we were talking at Anakin. So we need Anakin here. Yeah. Anakin's lightsaber, the non-virtual one, you can play him on Anakin. You can also play him Luke if you play a second copy of Luke and if you lost the first one. So that's an interesting, uh, uh, yeah, that's also synergy here. So that we're talking about we're playing multiple Lukes. We can play multiple Luke's lightsabers, but if we're playing one Luke's lightsaber and one Anakin's lightsaber, again, our maximum output is higher because we can still play this one on Leia or on Anakin, and it's a backup plan for Luke too. So definitely here we're going for the higher output, higher potential than just by playing two Luke's lightsabers in my eyes. And then there's still more characters here. There's still Qui-Gon with lightsaber and Rey with lightsaber, which are also good characters, strong characters. So these are like our main core. So where do we need to go from here? We're looking at battling with lightsabers, so we should also look at some cards that have synergy with this one. And I mean, we're not reinventing the wheel here. We are looking at cards that are, yeah, that you will probably see in a lot of decks when you look at event deck lists or rebuilding decks from other events. But we have cards here like a Jedi's Concentration, which is a nice card that if you have a lightsaber and your opponent has any lightsabers, with this used interrupt, you can say, all right, we cannot swing all lightsabers. And that's an interesting card. Nice. I mean, it's a use interrupt with a Destiny 5, always nice. But we're having here, we got the Chewie's Bowcaster, we got the General Leia with her blaster rifle. So these cards we can still fire, even if we play this one. But we can stop something like Maul's lightsaber or Vader's lightsaber or Kylo's lightsaber. And if our opponent does not bring lightsabers to the battle, we just do not play it. So this is a good idea. Used 5, we can use multiples. And because we're playing these EPPs, we can at least play, yeah, characters that are having a built-in weapon. We can play at least one of these here, where we can get back a character with a lightsaber into our hand with a Destiny 6, which is always nice. Also, we have something like Clash that we can use really well in battles. When we were talking about card that the opponent is playing, there is a card that can cancel Clash, the Crush the Rebellion. So we should be wary about playing too many of these, but one or maybe two. because they can have really devastating effect. I'm probably only playing one because with Clash you still have the character at the location and maybe for another turn, so it's not really useful to free Han. So we're probably only looking at one Clash. And while we're looking here for lightsabers, we're gonna play one of these to protect from other lightsabers in battles. Um, One card that people used to play in Prophets for some time is this one here, Lightsaber Proficiency. If you have a character with a lightsaber power plus 3, may add 1 to 4 strain. But this is a card that not many people are playing anymore at the moment. And why is that? Well, let's talk about that for a moment. You're playing lots of guys with lightsabers, so you can use this one. But you guys are already pretty powerful. We talked in the gameplay video about even if you have lots of weapons, you can make your opponent lose character that way, even if maybe the other person is having more power. So having lots of lightsabers and more power, that's just like overkill, so to say. And the plus 1 to 4 strain, um, if you have a lightsaber that's adding to 4 strain and you have this one, then you can add 2, so maybe you can drain for 3 or even more if there's another lightsaber, but because of something like resistance shield that we were talking about, draining for more than 2 is not really something that we need, right? Oh yeah, you're right. Thanks for noticing. Yeah, this is something I did not think about. Rey's lightsaber is actually wielding Anakin's lightsaber, so we will have to make a decision between playing Anakin's lightsaber or Rey's lightsaber, because having both in the deck is theoretically an option, but it's not really useful because our Anakin's lightsaber is a card we want to have on table. I mean, for a longer time. These characters was built in lightsabers, since they also have no immunity attrition and it's only one card. They're very useful to go in somewhere, battle, maybe make the opponent lose 2 cards or something, and then go to lost. While if you have a card that has immunity to attrition and you have a card on it, so if you lose Anakin, who's wielding that lightsaber, you're losing 2 cards at once. You don't want to do this. So we have a conflict here because this lightsaber is supposed to be on table long term and this one is not. So probably we're going to cut this one then, and then also cut this one, because if we only have this one character with a built-in lightsaber, we don't need the resilience anymore. That's just not efficient. Yeah, thanks for noticing. All right. So these are a card that I have a lightsaber, and also we have the card. Sorry about the mess. Blaster proficiency, also a very efficient card when you're battling with lots of weapons, because you can either use it to fire a weapon outside of battle, you can use it to make a hit character lost during battle, maybe before they can fire their weapon. And you can even use it in conjunction with Leia's blaster rifle to make it easier for her to hit. So definitely a card we want to add. This is maybe a good thing to, when I was talking about the card that opponents are playing, because this card is so strong. There's many people that play a counter card on the dark side, something like imbalance combo. It's an interrupt that cancels this one, or a ceasefire. But this card is so strong that even if your opponent is maybe playing such a cancel interrupt, it's still worth it to play it. Yeah, so we want to definitely put one of these in. And speaking of, yeah, oh, no. So we build our main core. We have 51 cards now. We still have to cut some of the Hans. We're still having the 3 Hans over here. We did not talk about that one. Because of the Secret Plans shield, if we play this Han and we're allowed to retrieve 10 fours, because of Secret Plans shield, this is probably not wise to do. And also we wanna probably maybe flip earlier than when we have 10 fours in the lost pile. So this one will go, and then it's basically a decision between this one, which says you retrieve 5 fours and they're immune to Secret Plans, or this one which says you have to pay the 5 fours, but then afterwards you got the cool effect that you can maybe play an interrupt from lost pile. Both are viable alternatives. Yeah, I'd just say try it out. I think we're going for this one here too, but you can also use the other one just as well. So we're at 49 cards, and we got the main core of our deck, but we're still looking at some utility characters and some more red cards. And there's not much space in the deck anymore. So yeah, we will get to the business of cutting some cards pretty soon. So if we're looking at characters, what I like to do here is the good characters normally have high ability. So we can go look for some characters we're missing by going through these. And we're having here something like Ahsoka Tano, who has a very nice game effect. Could be worth it. She's not really utility. Well, she is. She's not utility as in she's not wearing any weapons. But she has ability 6, so she can go anywhere. She has a nice effect, immunity to attrition and to permanent weapons, subtract from battle destiny. We have at ability 5, a guy that can cancel opponents' immunity to attrition. Since we're having so many weapons, we don't really care for immunity to attrition, sorry. We're having all these others. Yeah, now you're getting into some options here with ability 4. One thing we definitely need in this deck, when you're or what you should always have an answer for is undercover spies, and Corn Horn is just the utility weapon of choice against this one. And then you're getting to these cards that are just, yeah, nice to have and have cool effects, but probably are just not good enough to fit into the deck. Oh yeah, she's good because she has the synergy with the Skywalkers, and she can cancel the game text. And some people saying there's just like some cards are in every deck. Yeah, like Rey here, for example. You definitely want to have her. She's just too good to not put her in the deck. She basically replaces herself as a card. When you play it, you can play a card from. You get a card from a used pile, so you get something good. And yeah, her other effects are just insane. That's probably a card we can play 2 of, just because she's so good. And then you have cards like Hera, which is a standard character to include. Finn could be a card. Immune, yeah. Deploying as a react is nice. He can pull blaster proficiency, but Finn is really good if you can combine her with Rose. And Rose, on the other hand, is really good if you have another character that is resistance, but we're not having that many resistance characters, so I'm thinking she's not gonna get in there. And then we can play Jin Urso as an undercover spy. Um, if there's anything we can't solve by battling, she can always be an option, but just like we are using a card that wants to cancel undercover spies, opponents are probably doing too, so she's a maybe. Yeah, then that's another synergy card here because we're playing the moisture farm and this one deploys free at the moisture farm. And if this card dies, Luke is going to be power +6 in the next turn, so that's a nice, and it's Destiny 3 to boot, so that's a good card to include. And these are not cards that we're. And then ability 2, there's so many cards. This one could be an option to win a crucial battle or cancel a crucial weapon. But basically there's not that much more that we're looking for. And we might still even have to cut some cards afterwards. Yeah, Rose, we talked about that one. And these are all cards that can be useful in certain situations, but at the moment we're just looking for raw power here. Alright, so that is like all the characters. So what we still need is some interrupts. And we already have some battle interrupts. There's lots of cards that you can use for specific situations here. Like for example, Blasted Orchid, like once you have Han freed, you want to protect him, and if he's inside at the audience chamber, this is like an alternative to like leave him there and protect him. But it's this the one thing you can do with this interrupt, and we're definitely looking at cards that can be used in multiple locations. Like for example, the Clash can be used in the defensive battle when you're getting attacked, but you can also use it offensively. Exactly the same with Run Luke Run. You can use it defensively or offensively to attack the opponent into when Luke is at a neighboring site. So we don't want any of these. And then you got yeah, pretty standard thing you should play in almost every deck is a version one copy of Hujix and one copy to fetch this one. At this point, when people are activating like 15 force, often on like turn 2 or 3 or something, it's just too much stuff can happen. And it's important to be able to react if your opponent is able to do too much damage to you. So I think playing a Hujix is pretty much something you should play in every deck. One thing, Fallen Portal, it works at Tatooine Jabba's Palace, one of the sites we're playing, but also again, only used on the defensive. We want to go into the offense too, so not enough uses. So probably not gonna cut it. Yeah, we're not gonna be in space. I think that's pretty clear now. There's just not enough deck space to put any space in it. I mean, theoretically, you can play something like one ship and one landing claw or something. Or if you're playing, or let's go through this at this moment. You often see decks that play something like one tentative and one card to pull the tentative, and then you have a few pilots that you can put up there. Like you can put Hera in space, you can put Rey in space, you can put maybe Lando in space. But the problem here is you want these characters probably on Tatooine, and unless the one system that's on table is the Tatooine system, when they're in space, they cannot go to Tatooine, and when they're on Tatooine, they cannot go to space. Um, and having this one ship, like in Throne Room, you can do this because you're more on the aggressive. You're going to where your opponent is going. You need to be able to disrupt them and have a ship to do this. If you're actually playing a ship, there's actually a throne room that are cutting space entirely. But here we're having our own game plan. We're having battlegrounds to defend, and we're not starting. The opponent maybe has the initiative, so I don't think that attentive and some of these utility characters will really help us a lot. As I said, something like a ship and a landing claw could be an alternative to like, oh, if you have a capital, I'm just going to drain for free. But you need to find them, and there's ways to cancel a landing claw. And if your opponent is only playing fighters and not playing a capital ship, then you're not doing anything there. So I think it's just not worth it. Um, though I have to say, what I didn't talk about that one. Sorry, finding, since we have the must be allowed to speak and can use pile pulls. Um, that will really help us finding important cards like that one, someone who loves you, because we're playing multiple layers or ways to get a layer. That one, someone who loves you, or that will be good to get because of the multiple ways we have to search our use pile. We can all each turn search our deck. There's multiple cards here where we can go through our cards, through our deck and looking for what's in our force pile, and then draw for it or pull it from the used pile, as I talked about in an earlier video on gameplay. So, what was my initial thought on why I wanted to talk about space? It's this card. Um, Council Tatooine Occupation or Cloud City Occupation. These are two cards that really are in use at the moment and that can really give you uh, give you some problems. And having another way to control them is a good thing. Like we're having this card which says for a remainder of turn you lose no force to Cloud City Occupation or Tatooine Occupation. And it's a used interrupt, and we're having 3PO to cycle around cards in our deck. So that one can potentially control something like a Tatooine Occupation or Cloud City Occupation that's giving us problems. Like if we're playing against Imperial Entanglement, we're fighting on the ground, but just having this occupation on the table and them having one ship in space means we're fighting when they're still doing damage. But if we're having this one interrupt, the opponent can just grab it. If we're playing Imperial Entanglement, this is also a good card to grab so that your occupation is doing damage. So if we can add a second card against Tatooine Occupation, an opponent is only grabbing one of them, they're both used interrupts, we can control or get rid of the occupation and not get damage from it. And then they're both used interrupts with a 5 destiny, and these are always nice to have. In this case, this card does not really have a secondary effect. The secondary effect is just it's a used interrupt with a 5, so you can get it back, put it back um, at any time later in the game when you want to draw a good destiny. Again, one card here. Theoretically we're playing the moisture farm. We're playing Owen and Baru, so harvest could theoretically be a nice card, but again, we were talking about the shield. If our opponent is playing code clearance, the shield, this is a one-time effect, and then we're shutting off our general layer, for example. So not really a good idea to play it. Here we're having a standard. We should definitely play one card. Well, it's always a good idea to play one card that lets you have more shields. And this is our card of choice here because, again, used interrupt with a 5 and also able to cancel some nasty stuff that our opponent could get going. That's the Hoochix we want to add. Yeah. There's nice interrupt for females. Well, there's a few females, but they're not really the main characters we need to protect. Maybe except for General Leia when she has her blaster rifle. But she can also be protected by this one, by the blaster deflection. So we're not going to use one in this deck. Um, Going on the offensive, being able to cancel a key interrupt that our opponent is playing Imperial Barrier, for example, could be nice, but we're running out of deck space, and in this deck, even if we play something like a Luke and our opponent barriers us and we can't battle immediately, we're still there. We're still doing damage with the objective. We're still doing something like being able to battle later with something like a run Luke run. So it's not that important here. Oh yeah, that's also a pretty standard thing. Jedi levitation. Um, just so good. You can draw, if you're drawing a low Destiny character for Destiny, you can take him into hand. And once per game, like if you're playing Harvest or if you're playing multiple Harvests, even if you get the first one off, and then opponent is playing the shield to stop you, um, then it's bad. The Jedi Levitation also has a lost tag that says retrieve character into hand. So this is also a card that could be stacked on code clearance if your opponent plays it. So, but it's pretty useful even if you don't use the lost portion. So if your opponent is playing the shield, then you're just not playing it lost, or you're playing it only lost after you're not going to retrieve with Leia anymore. If you got something like I need this Han back one more time to be able to drain on Tatooine. This one is definitely useful. Um, oh yeah, let's talk about this one anymore. Nabru leads. Um, Not shielded, but a very common effect is Imperial Arrest Order, which basically limits you to move phase only, but still a card that is so powerful that if your opponent is not playing it, it can really be good if you're having so many powerful characters. So we can at least try to see if our opponent is playing this. Pretty useful card. If we're not playing Nabroon, this card, one of the many things it does is you are able to transport your character somewhere. This is also nice. Other text like cancel react, cancel disarm, keep the forfeit of a character that is hit. Pretty good utility card. Let's put one in for now, but maybe we're cutting it again because we have the Nabroon leads. Then we have Old Ben here, another way to have some, if you're on Tatooine, um, So basically, what you could also do if you don't know the card that well, if you're playing a Tatooine deck, you can go like, all right, let's show me all the cards that have a Tatooine in your game text, right? And then you will find this card, which allows you to revive a character you just forfeited from a Tatooine side, except Obi-Wan. So again, another way, if your opponent is killing your Han, who is so crucial, you can get him back. But you can also get something back like a Rey or a Qui-Gon Jinn with lightsaber. Uh, Very strong card. We should put one in here. And then you have some cards where I'm just not even looking at, like out of commission. Transmission terminated to, like, if you're playing against Hunt Down, we're playing so many Jedi and Luke, that we don't need to cancel their visage. We're happy with both of us leaving Force. You want to cancel visage with an interrupt, especially if Hunt Down is flipped and you're the only one that's losing Force, but we're not in that situation here. Another shield puller cancels trample, but since we have so many high abilities guys and we can keep our Han inside, probably don't have the space for that one in our deck. Yeah, so obviously, since we're not playing any protection against our Nabrun, our opponent could just as well also play Alice Herod. And Lightside has a nice situation that their interrupt, quite a mercenary, which is good against Alice, is just so much better than the dark side version, Uta Guta Solo, at least when we're talking about the non-virtual version. Um, so this one is just a total blowout card. So if your opponent is trying Alice and you got this one, you can really do some damage here. Um, but I don't think that Alice Herod is really prevalent in the meta at the moment, and it's not like we're really gonna be weak at some point where opponent can just Alice there and beat the crap out of us. Um, and also worst case, we got the Hoojigs, and also we want to battle opponent and not let them accumulate a big force that he can move around with Alice. So I think we don't have the deck space to play uh, such a card. Also a pretty standard card that sees a lot of play, Rebel Barrier, prevent your opponent from battling. Um, I just don't see us having the space here. We have the interrupts that allow us to be good in battle, like Jedi Concentration, Clash, Blaster Deflection, Run Luke Run. So the more you're good in battles, you're also good when your opponent is initiating the battle. You're prepared for that one. And the less you have these battle interrupt, the more you don't want to have a battle happening on your opponent's terms. You maybe want to stop the battle and move away or something. But since we're more of a battling deck, we don't need the barrier here. We don't have the space for it. Um, Rescue in the Clouds, definitely using at least one. Um, yeah, we were gonna have to do some cutting here. Um, Rescue in the Clouds, pretty small effect, so to say. Peek at top 3 cards of reserve deck, take one into hand. Close call, not really played anymore because so many people are playing Rescue in the Clouds, and the other effect is not good on Tatooine. You can only use that if the opponent is playing on mobile sites or something. But it's also gonna help us be an extra alternative. If we have one of these in hand, but none of the force locations, it's going to be an additional chance to get into early force activation. So that's why the rescue will be here and why it's in so many other decks. Um, if we want to if we want to cancel barrier, this one is maybe the better interrupt to do this with. Also used 5. Oh, we will have to cut some stuff, so probably. Theoretically, if we're playing against lots of walkers against Imperial Entanglement. So this is, yeah, pretty limited card, both in what it does, what it's good against, and also we're not really sure yet if it's a card, if it's that as a matchup that gives us problems. So we're talking about, I was talking about a card that are good in the meta. So what I mean is that other decks are playing, other people are playing lots of these decks that are playing these cards. What you always have to do is you need to test the deck and just see how it performs. So that's also why I like to go up to like something like 70 cards first. We're gonna need to do some cutting, but if we play the deck afterwards and notice, oh damn, I'm having problems in this and this matchup, then you're definitely you know what you cut and what you can get back to maybe help you. And then of course there are other cards like this what we're not adding and cutting, but if you're having lots of problems with walker decks and you're saying, oh, there's many decks playing walkers at the moment, which I think, yeah, some of them are like ISB sometimes, so the troopers are also very strong. Watto plays it, Imperial Entanglement plays it. Could be an option, but we're not doing it at the moment. Again, always a card that I'm inclined to add here, because the lost part, if you're playing against something like Vader and they don't pull the shield, it's just so powerful. And also the other effect, the used thing, like you want to pull all these weapons from your reserve deck with the side door, but especially later in the game when your reserve deck is not that big anymore, if you play a character and the lightsaber or the weapon is not in reserve deck, it's gonna be in your use pile or in your force pile at the moment. Um, the thing is, you can deploy the character and then before you're battling, you're playing this one used to maybe probably getting the weapon. So it's not a dead card if your opponent is playing the shield. And also here, Lost Council, you are beaten. Not much played, but can be a problem for you. So we can definitely put this one in here as an option. And I think that's about it. So we're at 70 cards. We need to cut some stuff. I think this one we added before. We're not gonna need it. Um, And then the easiest part, of course, is putting away stuff that you get multiples of. And of course, it's easy to say, all right, we got 8 cards for these 2 locations. Maybe cut something here. But getting these sites early is really, really important. So I don't think we should really do this. Maybe we can cut one speak because this one does not have a good effect once the Jedi Council is here. But then, yeah, and maybe we can get one of these 3 cards to speak, or the Jedi Council chamber with the help of our might be allowed to speak, or with one of the rays. But we should not touch the activation here because the earlier you get the activation going, the more you're gonna get all these other cards. Then we're gonna cut the undercover spy because we want to battle. We got the number of leads to go over there. Yeah, we're gonna cut this one. And we're gonna probably cut this one because we have the number of leads. And since we have a spy that we can pull with our cards here, the R2D2, we're cutting also the Cassian Andor. So this would allow us to go to our opponent's location if we want to, need to. And then we're probably, yeah, I'm a fan of just having the rebel leaderships and just having that one layer. Knowing that it can be a problem. Yes, there is. Nuring, thanks for the comment. This is actually my third video I did, and there's already 2 videos on YouTube where I explain some strategy. If we're looking at a how to play video as in rules, that's not something I do. I do strategy for those that know the rules and have some games played already. Okay. And then we're gonna cut a few more cards. We need to cut 3 more. Probably the thing that are most standing out to me are the mace and that one mace and that one lightsaber. Because yeah, then we're down to just 2 lightsabers plus the Qui-Gon's lightsaber. So maybe don't do this. Normally, I'm not a big fan of just playing one of this and one of this. But since we got the use pulse, I mean, we need to look out for that. We don't just that. Yeah, I can pull from use pile that this is our go-to answer for everything. But in this case, I think we're looking at someone who loves you, maybe if we're not fighting, or something like that maze, or at the beginning the activation. So I think these are like the cards that we need to pull with the use power pulls, and that's not that much. Yeah. So maybe just we're gonna take out this card here. If you think, yeah, Tatooine occupation is giving me a lot of problem, or a matchup with against IE, for example, is giving a lot of problem, you can get it back in. But at the moment, we're gonna take this out, and also not that many people are playing the barrier. Probably just gonna take out one more here. And then the additional Lando, we want to keep this one on the table. And yeah, then we're down to 60 cards, and that's a deck we could definitely play. As I said, we were talking about the locations and the activation package. We talked about having a maximum payoff limited by having the reliability of getting these cards. We were talking about having a good game plan, a straight game plan, which is here pretty straightforward from the objective, being able to battle on Tatooine so that you can free Han and then control these sites and drain. We're not having any space, so we need to be prepared to have these lightsabers. That's another reason to still have the mace and his lightsaber in there, because it's another drain +1. So we're having 3 lightsabers and 3 battleground locations on table. So if our opponent is doing something totally different, we can still drain here on all these sites for 2. Um, yeah, and then you just have some. Then you're looking at synergies, stuff that works together. Like you want to have layer, you want to have the leadership, so you can get layer, but also you get additional payoff by if you have layer and the leadership, they do more. And then when you have the leadership, you can play another character like General Jar Jar who can do other stuff if you're having a problem with droids. Um, yeah, we're in the battles, so that's why all these interrupts are in here, including the run, loot, run, because our sites are next to each other, and you just have some utility characters that probably just go in most every deck, like Corn Horn against Undercover Spy, or just Rey because she's just so good, and because we don't want the one with the lightsaber, since we're having Anakin's lightsaber as a single card and something like the Hujiks that you just want in every deck. Even if you're strong in battles like this one, um, it can always happen that your opponent is having the tricks to beat your tricks, and then the ultimate card that stops you from losing the game is that Hujiks. So there we have it. As usual, the same thing with the first two decks, the first two videos I did. We're already pretty far into the video and I have more content that I would like to show you. Um, let's do this anyway. I think the last two times afterwards I wasn't really happy about it. I need some light. Well, we're gonna do it here anyway and give you us a few more minutes. Um, and go over here but we're not going to construct it one by one. I'm just going to load it up and show it to you because we don't have the time to do this now. But I constructed another profit deck the other day in preparation for this video, and I at least want to show it to you. That you can go a different route, and I just want to explain it to you. So we're playing profit here, but I am choosing a very different setup here. And we're playing, you can see we're playing lots of one-offs. There's not a single character that is a double. And we're playing lots of numpty aliens together with Ancient Watering Hole. This one is also making my Force Drains +1 and also my Battle Destiny +1. So instead of using lightsabers to prevent me from just being able to drain for one, I'm using this one. I'm having drain +1 everywhere, so not just where my lightsabers are. And if my lightsabers die, I'm still getting the drain +1. But I need to jump through some hoops here, which is I need to have alien characters of 5 different species, which means that I'm having lots of alien characters from different species here. Nicely, Han is a Corellian, so that's one alien species. And then you're having all these other useful aliens that are mostly very different species. Maskanata, unfortunately, does not have any species, and neither does Lando, for example. But you got guys like this one. He's a really good example for a card that's having lots of synergy. He's deploy for free and power +2 at Jabba's palace. He's a Ugnaught, which means another alien species. Once per turn, if you just drew an alien for Destiny, you may take that card to cancel and redraw. We're having lots of aliens in there, so this is a very different route where your characters as a single character are way less powerful, but you're going for more different stuff and therefore a higher maximum output. And yeah, you can really go very different routes. And then you get something like Ayala Sakura, another different species. And if with 2 of your other aliens add 1 destiny, power +1 for each opponent's character here. So she's a really strong card. and that has good synergy with all these other characters in here. And then Moss has the synergy, reveal the top 3 cards of your reserve deck to take an alien into hand. You can do that at any time in your turn, so you can even go, like I know after I activated 12 cards because of what destinies I saw, there's going to be an alien you can take her, unless the dark side card when you need to do it in control phase. And also we are using this card, the bow shooter, that we cut from the other deck, because some of these characters you just you want to have a safe haven maybe to like for something like this guy. I mean he's power +2, but you can have some aliens out there or something like Figurine Dan, which allows you to retrieve a force maybe if you're drawing the good destinies. You're having a safe haven here at the audience chamber to pile some of your cards without getting beat down with lots of weapons. And you can use interrupts like you will take me to Java now, where you can deploy an alien from your reserve deck to the audience chamber, and stuff like this. So you're maybe not that good in battling in Free and Han, so that's why you're relying more on someone who loves you. The good thing is your opponent doesn't really know that. Like if you're starting Prophet, he immediately has to make the decision, do I want to deploy 2 aliens to the audience chamber, and if yes, which 2? And he will just probably assume that you're playing, that you're going to be good in battle, and he he can just maybe not deploy any aliens. Maybe he doesn't have them in deck, and then you can free Han pretty easily. And if you're fortifying the audience chamber, you could just free Han with someone who loves you, because also in this deck you're also playing the must be allowed to speak to fetch cards from your use pile to find it, and just do it that way. And then even if they have all these guys in the audience chamber, because you're playing the shooter, they're not gonna battle you there. Also, this deck does not really play any rebels, with the only exception here being the own Lars, but they're not in Jabba's palace. So you can also play the UO to make Bushuda not be able to cancel, to have your opponent's Imperials deploy +2. And then if you're afraid of Imperials, you also have this guy. Oh, sorry, that's uh, where is it? The oh, just need to load the deck again. So this one, which adds to deploy cost of opponent's male Imperials. There's not that many female Imperials. So you can get her to the audience chamber too, with this interrupt, for example. And then, yeah, synergies if you're playing Imperials and they all deploy +4. This deck definitely has a problem with the activation. I'm using both the rendezvous point to get a Tatooine battleground for this site, and the must be allowed to speak to get the farm. But I'm only activating 8 force from icons, and I'm giving away 4 icons. That's not good. So I'm playing the other Seeking an Audience, which lets me deploy this effect, which makes my force generation +1. I'm starting the Walkling for another force generation +1. I'm playing that one Luke Skywalker who's also at least a Jedi Master, so adding an icon. So force activation, a bit of a problem here. If my opponent is not giving me any force or only one force, that's a problem. Oh yeah, we're also having this R2 we didn't talk about in the first deck, but really good. And if you play him to a Scompling as an icon, you can play him here to the farm, for example, to make your activation higher, or play him to an opponent's location because he's a spy. And this deck, for example, I'm not so much looking, I'm not that strong in fights. I'm more picky about my fights. That's, for example, why a Foreign Portal that I didn't want to have in the other deck is in this deck, because it'll allow me to be at the Jabba's Palace and also have an interrupt that can protect me there somewhat. Right? Um, yeah. Also, we have the blasters in here. At least we're having Han's heavy blaster and the Leia's blaster and the effect. That's the ping damage. Um, and one more thing I wanted to show you, which is different in this version. Oh yeah, I got a little bit of space in here. I found room for the rig, for the one starfighter and the landing claw. Also, because I have this guy. Again, we're talking about synergy and having cards that work with each other. And the Baraquin, another alien with a different species. And you can retrieve the top card for a weapon or a device. But also during your control phase, you may exchange one card in hand for one weapon device in your lost pile. So you can get that landing claw back into your hand if you lost it early in the game, or if your opponent makes it cancel it or something, and you can redeploy it every turn if needed. And the problem is, apart from the landing claw, many of your aliens are not pilots. So yeah, this deck is pretty weak in space. But at least if you're playing against something like Imperial Entanglement, you got the chance, or something like Map, you got the chance to play these two cards and attach to your opponent's starship. Right. So we're not building this deck from the scratch, but I wanted to show you, played a few games with it. I just realized here we have the gift that we did not add to the other deck, but also again here it's more interesting here because you're also making your opponent's drains -1 and their battle destiny was -2. The -2 battle destiny is also interesting for the other deck, but here the drain -1 is also interesting because you're not so much looking to battle everything that your opponent has. Um, if you're playing against an alien deck, you're totally fine with just saying, all right, you don't get to drain because of a gift, and I can do my stuff and drain here. I don't want to battle you necessarily. I got other ways to win and just pick my fights more. Because you are having guys like Figuring Dan, which can retrieve a force, or you can have this one who can make a card lost. Additionally, you got more ping damage with the blaster effect. Uh, and yeah. So that's what wanted to show you too. I think that's the end of this episode. I may be doing one more. We're constructing another deck with a more balanced approach, with more space in it. Maybe, and maybe wrap up some loose ends. So this is like your last chance. If there's anything you want me to show you or talk about to you, um, I think at the max there's going to be one more video. So if there's any open questions, just shoot me a message on the forums, and maybe I do one more and talk about that one here. Again, thanks for watching and take care and bye.